we'll be ready to begin this very engaging and rich conversation on South-South cooperation to strengthen heat resilience and sustainable cooling.
So can you ask some? In the meantime, the speakers for this session can come and sit over there.
Hello, everyone. Very exciting. We'll get started in a couple of minutes. My invitation for you right now is to come closer together as a group. This is going to be an intimate working session based on some of these deep dive questions that we have designed, and it will be great if we can sort of come closer towards the front of the room to facilitate that small group discussion. Thank you so much. And it would be particularly helpful, I'm asking for a lot here today, But if we can sort of self-divide, am I too close? Lower? Okay. The photos are important. I'm asking for a lot here today, but it would be really helpful if we can divide ourselves sort of into two groups, because we have these two deep dive, small group discussions that would really enrich our conversation here today. So I think we are already there, but if we can sort of move to the left of the room and the right of the room, we'll have two groups that are able to do those conversations. I will let you sort of figure that out, and I will get started right now. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Sahi Upalpati. I'm a climate and cooling advocate at NRDC. It's so wonderful to see so many of you here today, and a special thank you for those joining online. I'm sure it's not a very convenient time for some of you, so a special thanks for everyone joining online. So over the next 2 hours, we'll have a set of really interesting speakers and conversations. And so before we get started on that, just a couple of housekeeping items. For those joining online, please make sure you keep your mics muted to avoid background noise. And for the presenters, given the full agenda here today, we sincerely request all speakers and presenters to keep their remarks concise and within the allocated time. There is a timekeeper here, so you have a sense of how much you have left and where you are at with that presentation. Okay, so with that, it's my great pleasure to invite today's session moderator, Yamit Dagnett, Senior Vice President for International Program at NRDC. Yamit leads the vision and strategy for NRDC's international work, shaping its impact and scale across many regions. Her decade-spanning career includes leadership across public and private sectors, civil society, with a great deal of experience in high-profile policy research, global initiatives, and international diplomacy. And those of us who know Yamit really well know of her unique ability to bring and strategically connect climate action with really important broader social and economic and development priorities. So it's a great pleasure. I invite Yamit to start us off today. Over to you, Yamit.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, I know that it's very low energy, and it's been a very long day already. I would like to welcome all of you and thank you for joining us for a session on South-South cooperation. I don't need to say again why it is important. I think we heard this morning that alone we can go that fast. But if you want to go really far, where we need to be, we need to go together. So in that spirit, we also earlier today mentioned some South-South cooperation in the region, in South Asia, in Southeast Asia, including with the launch of the South Asia Hub on Global Heat Health Information Network. But during this segment, we're going to really look at, how to advance heat resilience and sustainable cooling through South-South cooperation with insights from both India and Africa. And, before, getting into the core of the matter, I would like to pause and to look at why, we should really think a little bit more closely about the collaboration between a continent, as big as the African one, and with India. Extreme heat and cooling are really issues that are aligned, in terms of challenges and opportunities, for both Africa and India. The shared challenges include, among other things, the fact that both regions are very heat exposed, and we don't have as much data, in the continent, and this is an area that can be enhanced. But 70% of the global force, over 2.4 billion people, is already at high risk from extreme heat, in particular in Asia, Africa, and Asia Pacific. And this is not only a health crisis, as we heard, it's about productivity, equity, and development. Cooling demand is rising rapidly and could triple by mid-century, placing enormous strain on power systems and significantly increase emissions if growth is not managed sustainably. Both regions are also experiencing rapid urbanization and demographic changes. We heard that India has overtaken China as the most populous country in the world. But, 1 out of 4 people in the world by 2050 will be African. And the youngest, country is also, in Africa when it comes to the population below 25 years old. Another argument is that India and Africa are balancing multiple development priorities simultaneously: economic growth, energy access, poverty reductions, climate goals, within very tight fiscal and institutional constraints. Now, these are the challenges that the continent and, India are sharing. When it comes to opportunities, did you know that the trade between Africa and India is over 100 billion over the past 20 years? It's raised by over $100 billion. The ties, between also the continent and India are historical, political, through solidarity rooted in shared anti-colonialism. But also, we've seen how the continent really collaborated during the G20 presidency of India, and also when South Africa took over 2 years after, especially with the inclusion of the African Union as part of the G20. So there are opportunities for practical solutions, transfer of technology. There are a lot of opportunities for adapting what works, accelerating impact at scale. Another reason, and I think this is going to be the last context, that I'm going to give you, when it comes to climate change, there's going to be 2 important moments, coming. In 2027, Ethiopia is going to actually have the presidency of the UN Climate Conference, COP. And then the year after the COP is going to be in Asia. That collaboration, between Africa and Asia is going to be particularly important. And actually, in about a month's time, there's going to be the India-Africa Forum Summit, which has been quite overdue, but again, which really boosts again this cooperation between India and the continent. So today, we're going to focus into 3 core areas. First, the proven institutional approaches that enable cities to adapt and adopt scalable and transferable models for heat resilience and sustainable cooling. We're going to look at the use of granular community-level data to map heat vulnerability, assess cooling needs, get targeted evidence-based intervention. And we're going to look at mechanisms to unlock finance and develop bankable project pipelines that can move solutions from pilot to scale. So we will begin with short, focused case studies highlighting the solutions that are already delivering across both the continent and in India, spanning cooling, data-driven planning, and finance. And then we will have a brief Q&A, hopefully with enough time, and then break into small group discussions. This is why, my colleague Sahi ask you to already think on how you're going to be divided into two groups. During those two groups, we're going to look into more practical, actionable next steps, because it's not just about talking and sharing, it's about really looking at how we make that collaboration to become even more tangible and get to the scale we need. We will then reconvene and share the outcome of those sessions. And with that, I would like to begin with looking into emerging heat and cooling challenges across Africa. And to ground us for this conversation, I am delighted to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Ivan Ivanov. Dr. Ivanov is an occupational and environmental health specialist and adjunct professor at the State University of Zanzibar, the United Republic of Tanzania, and he will set the context with an overview of emerging heat and cooling challenges across the continent. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ivanov. Thank you.
Merci, Amit. Namaste. And a very warm welcome to everyone. My sincere thanks to the National Resource Defense Council for inviting me to provide an introduction to this session. Jumbo from Zanzibar, you see in my background, the place where India met Africa and the birthplace of Freddie Mercury. Across Africa, record-breaking heat is no longer a distant threat. It is the reality communities face today. Parts of North and Southern Africa are experiencing temperatures exceeding 2.4 above average, with some areas approaching a staggering of 50 degrees Celsius. And this is not isolated to a single region. Sub-Saharan Africa is warming 1.5 times faster than the global average, exposing over 1 billion people to escalating and life-threatening heat stress. From expanding heat waves in the Sahel to the persistent heat domes in the Kalahari, from oppressive heat and humidity along coastal areas to widespread impacts across most African countries, the continent faces a heat crisis of unprecedented scale. The map before you reveals this stark truth. By 2030, heat stress risk will blanket the continent, threatening crops, livelihoods, and human lives alike. And this is the geographic reality we must confront together. However, behind these statistics, there are real people, mothers, children, workers, elders, whose lives hang in the balance. Nighttime heat waves have driven a sharp and alarming increase in death risk. The vulnerability is profoundly unequal. Young children, pregnant women, older adults, and outdoor workers face the greatest and fastest growing risks. Extreme heat is directly linked to excess mortality, worsening malnutrition, and expanding vector-borne diseases across the continent. Consider this image on the screen from Matam, Senegal. A newborn lies under harsh sunlight, visible heat rashes covering delicate skin, wrapped in a light cotton cloth, a traditional protection that mothers in Senegal dampen to shield their babies from the scorching heat. This is the human face of the heat stress, and this is the cost of inaction. These are the lives that we have the power and the moral obligation to protect. As civil society organizations, researchers, international civil servants, we stand at a critical moment. The solutions exist. What we need now is commitment, courage, and coordinated action. First, we can make heat-related illness prevention a core commitment of all national adaptation plans. This cannot remain just a footnote. It must be central to our climate resilience strategies. We need to make heat illness more visible with our research and our voices. Second, we must champion locally led, low-cost, and nature-based heat health solutions that prioritize vulnerable groups and frontline workers. Communities know their needs best. Our role is to document the effectiveness of their solutions, amplify their voices, and support their leadership. Third, we must elevate extreme heat as a public health emergency and advocate for the creation of continental heat warning system. The map you see shows current alignment of the national adaptation plans with heat illness prevention. The gaps are clear and they represent lives that could be saved with better planning and faster action. Therefore, let us work together to turn every gray and yellow area on this map into a red one, meaning heat outcomes are recognized, assessed, and enablers are created for ensuring every nation has robust and visible heat health protection in place. Thank you for joining us today. Dhanyavad, Asanteni.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ivanov. And now I would like to, I think you gave a good understanding on the, how to actually, get into those planning processes, health, embedded in it, continentally, speaking. Now I would like to get into a more specific city and, how, we tackle this issue in Accra, specifically, with Namo Lawson from Sustainable Solutions for Africa.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So this is Namo from Sustainable Solutions for Africa. And we conducted, no. Yeah, thank you. So our organization is working on a research project in Accra, which focuses on heat stress impacts on women and their livelihoods. So I would like to share some of the insights we got from them and the cooling strategies that they have been using so far. So in Accra, it is an evidence that temperature is rising, and it is already up to 1 degree Celsius, and it is projected to go up to 3 degrees Celsius. And from our data, we've realized that there is unequal impact of this heat stress on the population, and we've noticed women are more affected, and also the elderly, those who are above 65 years old, and also people that are working outdoors are more affected. But when it comes to adaptation, we've also realized that from the data we got, that most people do not adapt, or they don't have the means to adapt. So about 85% does not have any strategy that they are applying to withstand the heat. And only 12% are able to cope. But what are they using? Most of them use air conditioning, surprisingly, and also fans. But people that don't have the means to buy fans or air conditioned, they just stay outdoors. That's during the nights, because when the room got very hot, they stay outdoors all night through. And those who have shops, they also prefer improving the cooling in the shop, like going for more windows when it is a small shops. So these are the strategies that they are doing. So, but when you look at Accra or Ghana in general, there is existing strategies for AC. This program, the Green Cooling Program, that is implemented in Accra or in Ghana generally. Don't go back. Okay, so this program provides financial institutes for some formal markets to get this efficient ACs, and also technical training. So what is needed now for this informal settlement in Accra, they need to get affordable cooling, and also promote more this passive cooling that they are already using. And for those who cannot afford, at least have financial support for the vulnerable groups. So Ghana also have enabling conditions that is already in place, but we think it's necessary to expand these initiatives. So it has some national climate initiatives already in place, and the cooling policies also, which is more focused on energy efficiency. That is using more less emitting appliances, and also building the capacity of the technicians. So from our research, we've noticed that vulnerability is really gendered, depending on what you are doing, and like I said, the elderly, and also the kind of work you do. And adaptation is really limited due to poverty, and also the informal housing people are in increases their exposure to heat. And the impact is interconnected. It runs through health. It impacts their health, their livelihoods, and we think there is a way to withstand, or to help the population withstand heat. And we come up with some recommendations where the government should prioritize urban greening, and also inclusive financing. Heat-safe labor policy is really important for those working outdoors, and also advocates for climate-sensitive housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Namo. And now we're going to go into a segment that is going to look more into the solutions, going a little bit more deeply. Now that we have the diagnostic, including, how to embed more of the health system into the process, the national processes, but also looking at in the informal housing, gender, vulnerability, and, the potential for scale. Let's see that in action, and I would like to do that by looking at the cold chain development, first, as a theme, then the data-driven insight for resilience and cooling planning, and then the financing of heat resilience and sustainable cooling. So I would like now to call, for first Robbie, who is going to, tell us about, some experience on the cold chain side. And then I will go to Roberta Evangelista.
Thank you, Hamid. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll talk a bit based on an experience of a project we did on cold chain development in Ethiopia. I do have a few slides. If they're there, yes. Yeah. Oh, there's a clicker here. Okay. Okay. So this is a project South Sazonor did with the German organization called Perspectives Climate Group. And this was as part of the program, the Clean Cooling Coalition that was managed by Climate Works Foundation. And it focused on the technical viability and economic viability of clean cooling technologies. And the focus was on that, including the enabling environment for it, and also inclusion of cooling in the national determined contributions in Ethiopia as part of this work we did. And in terms of solution or intervention, we undertook a sectoral prioritization in terms of where we felt, in terms of Ethiopia's target and its climate change strategy and in its NDC, in terms of where cooling can play a role. So scope based on the NDC target, the viability of the technology, and a number of factors that were worked out with governments in consultation with government stakeholders. I mean, this we can provide information a bit more on that. And we, as an outcome of this, wanted to focus on agro-processing, dairy, vaccine safety and health. And this project was implemented from 2020 to 2023. So right in the when was approved during the onset of the COVID pandemic. So on one hand, vaccines in terms of polio and so on were important, that cold chain in the health sector, but also Ethiopia and the Ethiopian Airlines as a hub for transporting a lot of that vaccines within the continent during the COVID pandemic. So that was one. Horticulture was an important one. Ethiopia exports a lot of horticulture abroad into the European market and so on and so forth. Agro-processing was at the center of government strategy. And dairy, where it was quite interesting to land in dairy because there's a lot of wastage as a result of the lack of cooling or freezing facilities in communities in aggregators that are next to rural communities. Capacity building was another element. In Ethiopia, you have what you call the ozone unit. Ozone unit is an intergovernmental body of 5 sectoral ministries that work on the Montreal Protocol and ozone depleting substances, and the Kigali Amendment, which links the Montreal Protocol on ozone depletion with the climate convention, is also sitting within this ozone unit. So it's 5 sectoral ministries, and we worked with them as a group, as the ozone unit, and outreach in terms of, as part of a consortium, because this clean cooling coalition funded around 30 projects, 20 to 30 projects in the developing world that were signatories of the Kigali Amendment. So there were a range of projects where there was big exchanges. The development of minimum efficiency performance standard was another element of this work, and the NDC integration I've already talked of. In terms of enabling conditions, policy, institutional, and systems, the project was able to develop best practice minimum efficiency performance standards for commercial refrigeration and its adoption. And in adopting it, the work focused the work was done in partnership or co-convening the Standards Agency of Ethiopia and the regulator, the Energy Authority. And it was one of the successful outputs of the project. And NDC integration roadmap also developed. Of course, at the time, it was in the lead up to the Glasgow COP. So there wasn't room to include, like reduction from gases, from cooling gases in the NDC that was being developed then. Unfortunately, it's also not included in NDC 3.0, and this has its own reasons that I'll come to later. In terms of financing approach and so forth, there was a guide that was developed as an outcome of this on how to access climate finance in rural cooling. And there were plans to develop bankable proposals as well. At the time, Ethiopia has had no access to the Mitigation Action Facility, and one of the considerations was to develop a proposal that would go to the Mitigation Action Facility. So what are the lessons? What is the scalable potential? But maybe I'll say a bit more on the lessons. So our outputs on NDC integration and climate finance access were felt they were applicable across a number of countries. And this is by piloting it because the CCC program had a number of other countries as well. So there was room for peer-to-peer exchange. And in that sense, the lessons around how to integrate the cooling in that sector in the nationally determined contribution of countries and also on climate finance access were found to be replicable or reflected to the realities in other countries as well. Yes, and NDC integration in general requires institutional embedding and commitment to look at national reporting requirements, and particularly because these are new gases. Ethiopia's NDC is based on, or mitigation strategies based on, carbon dioxide, methane, and NOx's. So even looking at the greenhouse gases that are linked to cooling is important while doing the inventory if it has to be included in the NDC. Capacity of the regulator is quite important, and who has been neglected during our work, or in general, in our assessment was customs. Ethiopia is a net importer of cooling equipments, and unless customs and that regulatory body is not capacitated, then it's difficult to know what they're looking for. The National Development Planning in Ethiopia is the climate focal institution at present, but our work had predominantly gravitated towards the Environmental Protection Authority and so on because of the ozone unit and that mandate they had. And I guess the lesson was it's important to include planning, finance, and other governmental bodies in there. The program we had was a mitigation program, and I mean a climate mitigation program, a climate change greenhouse gas reduction focused program. But in our work, what we've learned is cooling is a resilience issue, an adaptation issue, and that's particularly in a country like Ethiopia and other developing countries as well. So it required the reframing of our thinking and our narrative in implementing the project. So this is more or less, and some of the outputs are there in terms of publication.
Thank you very much, Robbie. So Robbie Reda from South North. So we have the experience not only from a few countries in Africa, but also from the least developed countries, also, from Africa, and how, from the mitigation lens and resilience, we can really look into the solutions for the cold chain. Let's go to Roberta Evangelista, from who will be presenting, online. Let's try to keep the presentation as short and concise to leave, a little bit of time for questions. So Roberta, over to you. Roberta from Base Foundation.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the work that we have been doing on agricultural cold chain. So Base Foundation is a not-for-profit organization. We're based in Switzerland, and we focus on developing business model and financial mechanisms that address challenges in the climate change space, broadly speaking. And of course, agri-cooling is clearly part of this. So the problem that we're trying to tackle is quite obvious, which means very large post-harvest losses that are costing India more than $18 billion annually, lack of sufficient cooling solutions, especially decentralized multi-commodity facilities, and insufficient utilization of existing assets. So many cold rooms are standing, but they are underutilized or not managed properly. And here I'm talking about India, even though this can be generalized beyond. So the impact on farmers and vendors is quite high, in the sense that they're forced to sell at low prices, often to intermediaries right after harvest. I'm not sure if you can see my slides, actually. If not, if you could please move to the next slide. Yes, we do.
You can go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. So over the years, Base has worked together with cooling providers and operators to develop the Cultivate app, which is an open source mobile application that helps the cold room operators to manage the inventory at the cold rooms digitally. This means recording information on users, occupancy, and finances. The app is also able to predict what is the remaining shelf life of the crops that are in storage, and thus helps to increase the farmers' trust in the cooling solution, and also allows them to take better decisions in terms of sale timing. So since 2021, we have piloted the app in India, Nigeria, Guinea-Bissau, and Iraq, and we are currently working in Odisha, India, to digitalize operations at 25 solar-powered cold rooms across the state. So what's important to specify is that these cold rooms are managed by women-led self-help groups and FPOs, and the app then supports them in making the operations at the cold room more efficient by increasing the room occupancy and also increasing the SEGs and the farmers' revenue. So the question now is, how are we doing this? And to implement this project, we are leveraging a strong ecosystem that I would like you to present in detail, because I think it can be exemplary also for other locations beyond Odisha. First of all, very important, the government of Odisha has financing, or is currently financing, decentralized solar-powered cold room infrastructure across the state. And we work with both existing, so refurbished cold rooms, and new assets. The second important aspect is that SEGs and FPOs can apply to manage the cold rooms, and their training, business development, and handholding support is financed by the Bloomberg Cities at the Exchange, with Colfresh as a ground implementation partner. And so where Base come in is that our effort basically come on top of this. So with the support of the German Development Cooperation Agency and in partnership with Colfresh, we have selected 25 cold rooms that are operated by women-led SEGs that are ready to be digitalized. And our goal is then to see how Cultivate, so this digital layer, can be beneficial for all the actors involved. So what this means is, on one side, the farmers that can monitor their crop quality with the shelf life models, the SEGs who can manage the rooms in a more efficient way, as well as the project implementers, because they are able to then accurately track what happens at the cold rooms in terms of impact and revenues remotely. If we move to the next slides, I'd like to show you how does this work in practice. And so the way in which you can imagine this is farmers and vendors, they come to the cold room to store their fresh fruits and vegetables, and this information is recorded in the Cultivate app. Then the farmers pay a small amount for cooling, so for storage, per crate per day. And this cooling as a service approach allows them to use the room without any upfront costs. On top of this, to incentivize the cooling usage, oftentimes the SCGs and the FPOs also market the crop on behalf of the farmers. And this means that they take care of transporting this to the end customers, either through home delivery to household customers or with bulk supplies to hotel, hospitals, schools, etc. So this approach is really interesting, and we have seen it work really well across a variety of contexts. So I'd like to leave you with a set of key lessons which, in our experience, are quite transferable also to the case of Africa. The first point that I'd like to highlight is that while introducing a new technology and innovation, it's really important to focus on capacity building. And so this step-by-step digital onboarding is essential for the community adoption. And this goes hands in hands with thinking about items like data and device availability, which often are topics that are overseen. The second key lesson is that community-run cold rooms are usually the best bet, in the sense that oftentimes if the cold room operators are part of the community, it's easier for the farmers to trust the solution and engage. And the last aspect is the importance of market linkage. So what this means, the advice here is not to consider the cold rooms in isolation, but think about them as part of a bigger supply chain where the focus is how do we make sure that the harvested crops stay fresh, part number one, but also how can they be sold then at fair prices. So also thinking about the sale aspect. And so this project that we're working on will run until the end of the year, and currently the cold room operators are being trained on how to use the Cultivate app. However, we already have very encouraging results from a pilot that we did in Rourkela, Odisha, and we are really, really excited to see what this approach could mean for, at scale, for thousands of farmers and vendors across the state of Odisha. I'll pause here. Back to you, Yamid, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Roberta. And thank you for highlighting, the specific, result of, the growth incomes of 30%, increased by 30%. So that's also, the economic beyond the health, benefits of, looking into this cold chain. Now, I would like to, in a more hopefully efficient way, go into the data-driven insight, because without the data, we can't go so far, right? So I would like to have some insight from Ashish Jindal from SC4All. Please, 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 shorter. Short, snapshot, 4 minutes. And then we will also go to Anshima Mishra from NRDC.
Thank you, Yamid. Good evening, everyone. I will try to do justice in terms of time management, but let me start with my own story. So about 3 years back, while working at NRDC on Telangana roof policy, some you can say discussion on heat action plan and all. So I remember that most of the time the question used to be like, for example, how we can actually do action in terms of if we have data, how we can do action, right? So for example, there are health facilities, there are, you can say, lot of things to be done, but can we go at a building level to basically understand what need to be done? So for example, at SC4All, what we are trying is through a tool called Open Building Insights. This is like an open access tool anybody can use. It provides a granular information at a building level. So if someone can pull up the slide, I can show exactly how it works. So the challenge of getting from a building level insight to do action is basically I'm going to discuss today. Next. Next slide. Oh, okay. So basically, if you see on the right, we know the problem. Since morning we are discussing it, and but the point is, it's all about implementation. It's all about action, right? So Open Building Insights integrates satellite, GIS, census, and all sort of data to basically provide intelligence into what is my building type, what is my roof characteristic, density, cooling hotspots, and all those things. So already right now it's capturing more than 20 parameters. So if you see below, there is just a snapshot, maybe it would be blurred, but it could see how basically just you can, for example, you can go to any state, any city, and you could basically point out what are the building characteristics. And what we have done, for example, in Maharashtra and few states, we have tried to do ground truthing through Mahila Housing Trust, that whether the data which is we are collecting is really, for example, the number of floors, the size and all, is it true or not? And what we have found, the accuracy of the data is close to 75%, and we are trying through AI-based machine algorithm that this could be upgraded further. Next. Yeah. So basically, the enabling conditions are if we can have, let's say, a data from the government, or maybe if we could partner with national, state departments, urban local bodies and planning agencies and could get their real data, we could really make an impact on ground. So I could share a few examples like from Kenyatta University, where we could inform energy efficiency initiatives while getting the data from the distribution transformer and through the heat map. Secondly, similar to this, we have also worked in McKinney County, which is basically through how you can say a heat action plan could be defined or could be planned in a more faster approach. For example, if I go to do a survey, normally a heat action plan takes significant amount of time. This morning I was just discussing with few of the people, and what I found, normally it takes 4 to 6 months to 8 months. Now, can we, and what we have found through this can really reduce the time to do heat action plan, right? So we have tried to work in Patan, Churu, you can say Nasik, to find the use case, and this is really, I think, going to help how we could think about implementation. Now the point is how, while in a group, we could have institutional ownership, we could find more use case and work with cross-department to really use this case. The good thing is this is an open access tool. Just you need to download it and you can develop sort of application, whatever is required for a city, for a, you can say a ULB or for a state. It could also help in maybe a dashboard where you can really track my impact in terms of whatever a heat action planning, or I want to implement cool roof, we can really use it. So I'll pause here, but on this from the south thing, I would like to say that this is something we have tried in Kenya, now we are trying in India. So we could really see and would like to take your guidance and discussion on how we can take this forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashish. And, insisting into the, yes, you can. Insisting about the effort for integrating different, processes as well, to maximize the data side. And Shima, over to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to try to be as crisp as possible since I'm a part of the organizing team and they would not be happy if I contribute to the delays. So I'm going to be presenting the heat vulnerability risk assessment as a case study of how we can use data-driven insights to actually do actionable things on ground. So usually when we look at a city on a map, we see the roads, we see the buildings, we see the districts. But I think what we don't see is the invisible geography of risk and possibly who is going to survive the next heat wave, who won't, who would be the most comfortable, who would be the least comfortable in the coming up heat wave. So that is something which is actually not random. It is actually deeply, precisely patterned within the urban design and the build of the city. And once we learn to read it, it is not possible to unsee it. So we have developed So we have developed a heat vulnerability risk assessment methodology, which entails doing principal component analysis based on all the indicators that we receive. And at the core of this assessment is the IPCC framework, which categorizes it into these three different pillars of exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. Exposure being the degree to which these people are physically exposed to heat. So I've given some examples of some indicators in this. In the coming up slide, I'll show some maps as well. So these indicators like land surface temperature, population density, these entail to exposure. Then we have sensitivity as to how susceptible they are to heat. So this includes things like the built-up index, the informal settlements, and then there's the adaptive capacity, which would be their ability to cope up or to respond to that heat stress. So essentially, risk would not just be about how hot a place is, but it would also be about who lives there, what resources they have to deal with it. So this approach, I believe, is becoming especially important across cities in India and could also be applied to many parts of Africa as well, where there is rapid urbanization, reshaping of the land use, cooling demand is rising sharply, and vulnerability is deeply uneven. So these are some of the maps from the city of Ayodhya, which is a city in Uttar Pradesh in India. And these are the three maps of exposure, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity, which I spoke about. So the combination of this gives us a heat risk map for the city, and this is at a neighborhood ward level so that we understand what exactly is going on within the city, within the neighborhoods of the city, and we can place cooling centers, we can place water kiosks, we can do these adaptation measures within the city to help the people cope up with the heat stress that they've been dealing with. So if we look at for example, the map of exposure, we see particular wards and localities which have been highly exposed, which may have high LST, high population density. Similarly, if we have one glance at the adaptive capacity, we would know which ward is surplus in resources and we would know which ward is very much deficit in resources, so that the governments, the people know where to act on. So when we combine these two maps, we get a risk map, which is, the formula we see is fairly simple, which is exposure plus sensitivity minus adaptivity. But again, the power is in execution, as everybody has rightly said here. And we get the spatial risk map. And instead of generalizing the heat alerts, it becomes targeted, it becomes location specific, and it tells us exactly which ward needs priority action and why. So the maps we build are not just data, they would be portraits of the communities that have been exposed, sensitive, and underserved for quite a long time. And one experience which I have had with these heat vulnerability assessments is that when we show them to local authorities as well, they always respond with one thing, that we always knew something was wrong in this area, but now we can actually pinpoint the reason to why it is wrong. And I would be echoing back something that we actually discussed in the governance session today, that how to make a case across to the government so that they are involved into our action. So this, I believe, is also a very strong case point, which we can show them exactly what is wrong with the city at a local level, and actually get their viewpoints, get their buy-ins from them, and so that they're able to act better in the city, they're able to respond better to what people need in that neighborhood as well. So I would just leave with one thing, that I think it's been resonated throughout the sessions as well, that heat is not just a uniform hazard. In reality, it's deeply unequal. And unless we understand that inequality spatially, socially, and institutionally, our responses will always fall short. And I believe data-driven approaches like these would be a step towards not just making them reactive, but also making them actionable and precise. Thank you.
Thank you, Anshima. And I think, throughout, all of those interventions, we've seen, how to enhance the capacity, by looking at the institutions, that need to be involved, how to integrate, to address, to reduce the fragmentation that we're facing and how to de-risk. And that really raised the issue of finance, because none of that, will be done without, the finance we need. So I have, the pleasure to invite, Mr. Rajesh Yadav, yes, who is a senior investment officer from the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, to share his perspective on how to scale up finance for sustainable cooling solutions.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It's pleasure to be here in this, and I could make out that the dais was very cool. The morning minister also mentioned, about the, cooling paradox, heat and cooling. So, with this, I would like to begin my address by thanking, and I see the time allocated is 5 minutes, would like to do justice. But I would like to thank the organizers, NRDC, Department of Science and Technology, and NDMA, CDRI, and all the organizers here for this wonderful, convening. And I note that this year focus is primarily moving from diagnosis to implementation, exactly where the multilateral development bank should be in conversation. So with this, and I understand that heat is not now anymore seasonal inconvenience. It is a structural threat to health, to food systems, and also to energy and to economic growth. So I would like to, so let me briefly, quickly run through the slides, and let me brief who we are. And we are a 21st Century Multilateral Development Bank, USD 70 billion approved, 360 projects, and working in 40 member economies with our financing. But what makes us different is not the scale, but it is the design. As you see from this slide, the majority of our votes are held by developing economies. Our board is non-resident, which means we are agile, accountable, and low cost. We have our 4 thematic priorities where we finance, which is green infrastructure, technology-enabled infrastructure, connectivity, and private capital mobilization. That is exactly built around this agenda. We are also built to serve the global south, and it is our constitution. In the second decade of this bank, we are expanding to non-traditional sectors, which is social infrastructure, of which heat resilience is the prime example. So if we go that we primarily invest in 4 sectors, which is transport, energy, water, and urban infrastructure, and we do not just lend. We deploy a full capital stack, sovereign-based financing, non-sovereign financing, and also equity and guarantees to crowd in private capital, which will not go otherwise. We see, I need to quickly move on this slide. We see that the heat resilience is not a sector, and it is a systems problem, and it sits at the intersection of climate, human health, and the natural environment. And at AIIB, we call it climate, health, and nature nexus. And we build infrastructure that addresses all of these 3 simultaneously. Our principles are clear: accessible, green, inclusive, and resilient infrastructure. Health is health is there in every infrastructure decision. Nature is treated as infrastructure, and it is not a cost. And when we design infrastructure through these lenses, heat resilience is not just an add-on; it is embedded from very start. So if I go further, the link between heat and the cooling is water. And here I would like to mention that at AIIB, we have just released our flagship report in the last week at the World Bank's Springs meeting at Washington, D.C., and this is Asian Infrastructure Finance 2026, where the water flows, and makes the case that climate is fundamentally destabilizing the global water cycle, and infrastructure must respond to it. And the Sponge City approach treats water infrastructure as a climate buffer, which means that it supports storing, channelizing, recycling water to cool cities and sustain agriculture and protect ecosystems. Now, if I move further, let me quickly unpack this further because the water-heat connection is the backbone of our investment thesis. Now, heat resilience, as we note that it is no longer a separate entity and it is maybe treated as a global public good. Now, heat increases water demand, water scarcity worsens under rising temperatures, ocean thermal heating is accelerating, but water is also a natural cooling system, and water systems are resilient infrastructure. The drought and flood paradox, where the same geography experiences both extremes, often at the same season. Now, it is not a contradiction. Now, it is basically a design challenge. Now, water enables green cooling. Water energy cooling nexus is not a vicious cycle, and it is an investment opportunity. AIIB invests systematically across this nexus, turning flood, drought, paradox into a green cooling infrastructure. Now, we are not theorizing. Now, we do, on the portfolio side, we have live operations accelerating investment, climate transition for green, inclusive, resilient economic growth in Uzbekistan. On the pipeline side, we have India climate policy based environment resilience project, including drought mitigation and water balancing. In Chile, we support climate resilient water infrastructure. And globally, the next generation for infrastructure is for planetary health. So let's quickly enter into the two portfolio cases. First is about Uzbekistan. And just for a general sense that climate policy-based financing will be utilized for policy transition, while investment projects support the downstream investment. In Uzbekistan, the Uzbekistan signed a Paris alignment. It has its NDC. It has Green Economy 2030 framework. But the institutional ecosystem to deliver did not fully exist. Climate priorities were not investable. Carbon markets were underdeveloped. Social protection was not connected into the transition, leaving the most vulnerable exposed. The bank stepped in, not with a project loan, leaving the most, also with a policy-based loan. There we financed 500 million, co-financed with Asian Development Bank, and this was a budget support, and budget directly tied to reform milestones. Implementing spanning through 7 ministries, including the National Agency for Social Protection. Gender mainstream into every milestone. And this is the whole of government climate finance approach. And the lessons learned is that the policy reforms is also an infrastructure support. Next example, I would like to quickly go through the India example, where in Maharashtra, the drought and flood are not opposite. They are simultaneous realities in the same geography, and they are happening at the same season. Now, agriculture water inefficiencies compound both. No single financing instrument closes this gap, and we adopted two approaches. First, the climate upstream level is the policy climate-based support, which is aligned with the Viksit Maharashtra 2047, India's $1 trillion economic goal. And on the downstream side, it is linked with river linking, flood management, agricultural solarization, and pump storage directly linked to different investments, totaling around $1 billion. And this is a replicable template we used for Tamil Nadu, Odisha, Kerala, and others. So quickly, I will like to go through, not looking into that, the time is up. Now looking into that, we have next round of investments which are available in Africa. We are supporting Madagascar. South Africa, there is a $1 billion climate financing loan where we are supporting through energy, transport and water as part of this. In India, we are supporting Maharashtra, Rajasthan, Kerala, Tamil Nadu. So I will move further on the next slide just to look into that there is less time. So if we look into the global South-South cooperation and Africa and where we stand, and we see that there are shared challenges and opportunities. There is an escalating demand. We note that Africa faces projected surge in cooling demand. Currently, only 13% of the household are using air conditioning system. But this demand is going to peak by another 60% by 2040. Similarly, India's cooling demand is to increase by tenfold. If we collaborate, we see there could be a multiplier effect which can reduce emissions by 68% by 2050. There are already existing mechanisms of cooperation to name that there are South-South learning experiences, specialized dialect platforms like this one. There are institutional partnerships which are ongoing, and there are further support in terms of the capital. There are 4 pillars of co-financing. First is the policy and finance, cooling actions, technology, manufacturing. There are so many aspects which are going. There are technology-driven things of low refrigerant technology, passive cooling. There are human-centric development which is happening, and cold value chain and food security. There are many more things which are coming in terms of newer approaches which the startups have brought. And lastly, I would like to mention that there is a lot of financing gap in this space. We are one of the financiers which are available from the multilateral development bank, but we are not working in silos. We work with the development partners. We work with World Bank, ADB, international organizations like AFD, FAO, and others. We work with governments, and we work with the other development partners.
Okay.
To end with, we are here to co-invest, co-design, and work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Look, this was a lot. There's a lot to digest. There's a lot of opportunities here for collaboration. Thank you for providing some illustration for South-South cooperation on the procurement side, peer exchange visits, and so many. I think throughout this session, and you can get your seat, I will ask for some clarifying questions before we split into 2 groups. We've seen the importance of embedding a lot of those solutions into the national processes that are in place, not just to tick the box, for the report that we need to produce for the UN, but to really foster implementations by having all the actors involved into the design of those processes, to really facilitate implementation and integration as well, to make sure that we're not wasting, in overlapping, efforts. But the beauty of, this extreme heat and how this is looked at is that it spans from, the way we procure, some of the work, how we look into the cold chain, the implication for, food security, avoiding waste, managing waste, increasing the productivity, and also, the health, everything related to water. So there's a lot. I'm not going to even try to summarize. I would like to leave a little bit of time for some questions, and I think that Dilip, had already, raised his hand. Dilip Mikarava. Yeah. And you've been working on India's, heat action plan. Yes.
Yeah. So quickly, because this was a south-to-south sharing session, I thought I will speak a little bit about what the World Bank is facilitating, learning from Ahmedabad Heat Action Plan to South Africa's Gauteng province, which is the capital region of South Africa. Last 2 years, we have had exchange visits, workshops, and detailed studies based on the Ahmedabad Heat Action Plan model. And the South African team visited Ahmedabad and saw the activities in Ahmedabad in November 2024. Following that, there has been series of studies in that province done by the South African Research Council to assess the thresholds for heat-related mortality increase and set the thresholds. We are also working with the South African Weather Service to develop localized prediction models based on those thresholds. And the South African Local Government Association called SALGA is also working with different partners, the cities, the environmental agencies, the emergency disaster management agencies to develop a heat action plan. And this year, there were some pilots of community awareness. There is a whole program for training medical and paramedical staff, as well as developing the heat action plan so that in the next summer of South Africa, this will be implemented. And this is being supported by the World Bank, the South African Treasury, and the Swiss Economic Development Agency. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing this experience. So any additional questions? We don't have time for more. We want to actually stretch a little bit into splitting into two groups. Any questions? No. So I would like to get, Sahi, our colleague Sahi, to just tell you how we're going to split. I see one hand, and then, to have the...
This is not a question, but more observation in terms of what a delight it is to listen to this specific panel. And I see all the possible ingredients for a major Indo-African South-South cooperation initiative possible, probably led by an RDC, but many others as part of that or outside. And the elements that I noticed in the panel, one of that is the mutual benefit and solidarity is very clearly explained, and that's a fundamental of any South-South cooperation. Mm-hmm. Second thing that I saw was the respect for national sovereignty and non-interference part of this, and that is something, so there is no competition, it's a collaborative work that is very much possible within this. I also noticed from the presentation that were done that shared development experience and appropriate solutions are already found. They just need to be readdressed with the new context. And the last, and I'll stop with that, that the collective self-reliance and complementarity is there. So it is not one country taking over other countries' market, but it is about the self-reliance of each country and complementarity that is developing. So what a special, really, it would have costed millions of dollars to scope out a program like this, and we've done it in one and a half hour or so. So thank you very much for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is a great way to actually conclude this particular session before getting into a group. Thank you very much for this. And what I would like to really highlight is what you said about self-reliance. It's about the mutual, respect, benefit, into all of this. I feel like there's enough material to almost bring all of this together into eventually a report so that everybody actually have a clear sense of what is already out there to build up, to really get to the scale and really accelerate, that implementation. So before we get to you, Sahi, can you join us into actually clapping and thanking, our panelists? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and expertise so generously. I think it sets the tone for the next segment of our conversation, and I invite you to join the audience for this. So the request I have is we break into 2 groups on each side. So 2 groups on the left, 2 groups on the right, and let's have an intimate conversation on some of these key questions that are going to be displayed on the screen shortly. So one group, can we get the next slide, please? Okay, so I think we have about 20 minutes left. So we were hoping that the left side of the room can talk about how can India and Africa collaborate on shared data standards and tools for heat risk mapping, and which innovations are most transferable. This is the question for the left side of the room, and the right side of the room could talk about what is the need to make heat resilience in cooling projects bankable, and how can governments and finances better align to unlock the investments. And Kathy from HERA and Naeem from C40 have very kindly agreed to be the session leads and sort of report back after 20 minutes so we can have a broader discussion. So this is the in-person group, and Yacinth is leading the online group on the question of India-Africa collaboration. What mechanisms really can sustain a long-term collaboration? What are some of the elements of it? And how do we ensure that there is a continuous knowledge exchange happening? So these are the 3 questions, and I please request you to form into tighter groups, and I invite the esteemed speakers also to join the conversation. And we are at 9:26, so I think we have time till about 9:45, and then we'll have about 15 minutes to report back and synthesize the incredible conversations that you've had in your groups.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone online. I think it's easier for us to group together since we don't have to move. And I'll just share my screen and we will start the discussions. And it will be great if we can turn on our cameras.
Okay, so
we can play a game 1, 2, 3, 4 like this. And one would be the odd would be at the same even
that's a good suggestion. Okay, lots of suggestions on how we can do this a little bit more interactive.
The main group. I hope that works.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that sounds good. So our question is, I have that here. I don't know if you can see that, but India-Africa collaboration, what mechanism?
Okay, I think now is fine. So lots of suggestions on how we can do this better. Can we just self-divide, maybe just no 2 groups, just one group on the left, one group on the right, and Yamid and I will come down and help set this up. But yes, we'll display those questions on the screen, and that'll be helpful. Perfect. Yes, thank you so much. Let's reconvene as a big group since we have only 15 minutes left. 2 minutes there? Okay, sure.
Okay, so I feel like we were just getting into it, some energized with some exercise, otherwise. So now I'm going to ask, each of the facilitators to report back. Can I start with you, Kathy? And then we will go to Hyacinth, and then Nahim. So can we get all facilitators, here? You can sit and then just, share.
Yeah, thank you.
You don't like to sit.
Hi, everybody. You still live out there? Woo! Okay. Woo! Yes, that's what I'm talking about. We were the data group. We stood. That's how urgent this work is. We stood up for the meeting, and that was important. And what we came to is one big takeaway. There are already standards for data. WMO has those standards. We need some help on the health side of the data, and we need bilateral and at different levels policy agreements for the data sharing and for the standardization. And so that's it. The night is upon us, and that is it from our group, and it was great. Thank you.
Very effective and succinct. Standards are there, but we need different level of policy sharing, standardization. What about you, Yasan?
Great. Thank you, everyone. We are the online group, and we came up with 6 bullet points for the India-Africa cooperation. The first one is the value of targeted peer-to-peer, one-on-one city or technical department collaboration. So these more targeted collaboration between cities. So these were highlighted as more effective than broader multi-city engagements. The second one is there is a strong demand for structured India-Africa collaboration. So following our meeting today, we think it would be good to convene a special meeting online to have a more structured discussion around human health, protecting crops, public health at the intersection of heat and cooling. So to continue this discussion. The third one is knowledge exchange and cross-learning are critical. We have already had some knowledge exchanges, but it will be good to find the right level and the right expertise between cities and between countries to match them, so the right counterpart. The fourth bullet point is around data. We need to connect data to implementation. While tools for heat vulnerability assessment exist, there is a key gap in translating data and analytics into actionable, scalable projects. The next one is around finance and scale required aggregation of solutions. We have AIIB, so for them, multilateral development banks need bundled, scalable, and proven interventions to justify large investment across multiple countries or cities. And the last one is just to leverage existing platforms and institutions. Rather than creating new mechanisms, we suggested using and aligning with existing cooperation channels. So these are our 6 bullet points, and happy to develop any of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, very concrete. And this is why I left also finance for the last, right? Because it was mentioned. So how to make this happen? You can come.
Thank you, Yamide. So I think what came out of the discussion is that capital is available. There is money. The private sector has the money. The development banks have the money. What we need to do is create an enabling ecosystem for cities to access it. And I think there were various examples in terms of how maybe the transport sector or the energy sector, where now most of the investments are happening from the private sector because an enabling system has been created. And we need to do the same thing when it comes to cooling and heating in India and Africa both, because the problems are very similar. And the second aspect of the bankability, the word bankability in itself, I think we need to ask the question, bankability, the definition changes in terms of who is asking that question. So from a financier's perspective, it might only be the IRR, but from a government's perspective, it is also the systemic economic value that the project generates. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, we do have a number of solutions. I think, today I would like to just thank you. It was a long day, for staying with us till the end. We had a number of, actions and follow-up, steps, to look at how to enhance our data set, how to create, the different, solutions that we talked about, today, how to make, some solutions more accessible financially, and create not just looking at what we talked about from a risk point of view, but also from economic value. So with that, I would like to again thank you and have everybody to applaud itself, and let's continue the great job. There's 6 steps about how we take this forward. It doesn't stop here; it continues. So thank you. Am I correct to say that there's going to be dinner also served later, for everybody to know what next? And there we go. So there's going to be a performance. So until the performance comes, you can run, you can dance, stand up, take something to drink. So a performance and cultural performance, and then there's going to be dinner offered, for you to continue networking for the solution. And thank you for the online participants. I don't know if from here you will be able to see the cultural performance, if you want to stay, but you're free to do whatever you want. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.